Hi class, today we're talking about chapter 5, forming a group. So you guys are practicing this week with your own groups, and I'm so sorry about, I didn't realize that they had listed the live lectures as unavailable, so I had been posting them every week, and you guys weren't able to see them. So that's not super helpful. So I was getting a lot of questions. I'm like, I wonder why people, they must not be watching the lectures. Well, nobody was able to watch my lecture because it wasn't made available. So if you get a chance, hopefully you can go back and watch my lecture, and hopefully I will give you a little bit more information if you're confused about the group process at all. But we are going to be talking about forming a group today, which you are getting the experience in doing so. Hopefully, you've been able to find people to um, work with you. I had some people a little frustrated that maybe you guys weren't put into groups already. And the reason I didn't is when I put you into groups already, then you have to record the group for each person in your group, which would be about 5 hours of work. And so usually that ends up having issues like typical group work. You have some people who don't, they get their group recorded and then don't show up for other people's. It's a lot of time. You guys are all in different locations. So it can cause for some issues. And so that is why I chose to allow you to, one, you could use classmates or you could use people you knew. I just find that in my experience of teaching this course a little bit easier because it opens up your variety. Again, you could do it via Zoom or you could do it in person, depending on your situation. I don't have an objection to either. I just want to make sure that you're able to have the people so that you have the feel of a group. Okay. So, developing a proposal for a group, we want to figure out who is the group for? What is it about? What are things we need to think about? What is the plan? And how are we going to evaluate what we're doing? Attracting and screening members. So, some groups, depending on the kind of nature of the group, they might have some level of screening before people come. Now, if it's like an AA group, NA group, some of the self-help groups, that's not necessary. Other groups that will be necessary, especially probably if they're closed groups. Whereas a AA is an open group, so anyone can show up. So you want to make sure if you're ever going to lead a group, you understand what the group is about and what the point of the group is so that you find the right people to join the group. So should this person be included in the group at this time with this leader? What methods of screening will you use? How can you determine who may or may not benefit from the group? And how might you deal with a candidate who is not appropriate for your group? So you want to think who's going to make up the group? How big should the group be? How often should the group meet? How long should the group meet? Where is the best place for group sessions? And is it, like I said, an open group versus a closed group? All things to consider. Um, you know, group is a microcosm of the real world. It allows us to see how we relate to others, which has some interesting components to it. If you've ever been part of any sort of group, you've seen dynamics. I've been in many different types of groups myself, not necessarily all mental health groups, but just even Bible study groups. And you have dynamics in groups, right? Because we are people and we come with our own things and we have our own personalities. And sometimes group members can be annoying, all that kind of stuff, right? And if you don't have a leader who's in control of the group, sometimes people like go a little nuts, so there's a lot of dynamics there. So we want to make sure that we are aware as leaders of what's going on in the group. We want to make sure we're providing a good environment so that everyone can have a positive experience. And the best thing about group, which I really appreciate, is group allows people to not feel alone. A lot of times in therapy, we'll talk through things, but when you're talking with people who are experiencing something similar to you, different but similar, maybe further down the road in their experience, maybe they're further down the road in their grief, or maybe they're further down the road in their recovery. Maybe they're 5 years into their like being post divorce. When you've gotten to that place, and you're able to see wow, these people are here and they've made it to the other side. Like there's hope. It allows people to not feel so isolated and alone, and allows people to know, like, I'm not the only one facing this journey. And I think a lot of times people feel very alone and isolated in their mental health struggles when really a lot of people feel as they do. And group is one way to really allow people to see they're not alone, they're not by themselves, and that they can face hard things. So sometimes people will have a pre-group meeting. So it's a way to set up expectations, kind of like if you have kids that are in elementary school, or if you've had kids in elementary school, or you went to elementary school one day, there's sometimes like a meeting before school starts to tell parents, like, this is what to expect, or this is what we're going to do. Similarly, it's giving people expectations. So if they know the expectations, then they know kind of the boundary, and then they're held accountable for those things that they've been told. We want people to be aware of what the expectations are so that they can thrive in the group. And that way too, we are all on the same page. Like, I made this very clear to you, we aren't doing this, or I've made this very clear to you, we are doing this, whatever it may be. So yeah. Positively associated with the group cohesion and member satisfaction, preparing for a group experience is a key aspect of informed consent. Going over all the information of what they're filling out in their forms is important. Knowing the limits of confidentiality, understanding what it looks like if it's a short-term group, and again, talking about any concerns that they have, encouraging them to make sure they're asking questions about the purpose, the plan. Are they clear on what they're getting themselves into? Do they understand what's expected of them? Can they commit to what's expected to them? Talking about anticipating frustration and disappointment. Instill faith in group work. Discuss ground rules about confidentiality and subgrouping. So confidentiality looks a little unique in a group because, of course, as a clinician, we're mandated to confidentiality unless it's like a harm to self, others, elder abuse, or child abuse. But for group members, we're having them sign forms saying they'll keep things confidential, but they're not held to the same standards as we are as professionals in our field. So people are having to trust one another that their information is going to stay private without really knowing each other, which is a little uncomfortable. And that's why group is a process and there's different phases. And we're going to get into that more as time goes on. You've probably gotten a little into that in your Yalom text, but it's important that we stress, like, we want to keep everything within the group. This isn't for you to go home and report to all your friends what's happening in the group or anything of that nature. We really want to keep it within the group so that everyone feels comfortable and safe and ready to share and willing to share. So nobody misses out on this opportunity. When people start to maybe share or violate confidentiality, then we lose trust. And then that's foundational for a group setting. So we want people to feel comfortable. And you know what? The world is so small in so many ways. So you never know. Like, yeah, you maybe have never run into someone before but that's not to say there's not a mutual friend or something of that nature. So it's best practice that nobody should be talking about what happens in group outside of group, about other people, at least. This isn't about gossip or guess what happened to this person. We're really trying to grow as people in the group setting, and we want to be able to support one another and be there for each other and not allow maybe some really juicy information be something that's driving us sharing stuff outside of the group. Okay. And I'm not referring to the clinicians, I'm referring to group members. And so we have to really stress that as the leaders to make sure people don't do things that they shouldn't in regards to confidentiality. Now, we can't control that, but that could be grounds potentially of kicking someone out of a group. Okay. Now, some groups will have some level of evaluation, which is important at the end, and that might help you. Again, evaluations aren't meant to be critical as much as it is supposed to be constructive criticism. What's worked well? What have people learned? What would they do differently? What felt most pivotal to change? It's all a way of, trying to gather data, information to figure out the success of the group, figure out what would maybe make it better, what would maybe they change, do differently. Again, not to be critical of the leader, it's just more or less to be very aware of what's working and what's not working. And that's pretty standard in all kinds of settings. So don't be too intimidated by anything of that nature. That might be something someone from your agency that you work for or someone in your office asks you to do, but it could be very, very helpful. So I'm looking forward to watching all your videos and seeing all your hard work. I'm sure you're all doing great. And I think that's it. So I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.